It's Driving, and today I'm driving what's sort of a bucket list car really, something I've not been in before but I've read about, I've watched other videos, and now I'm finally at the wheel of this, a 1965 two-stroke SAAB 9.6. Wow, it is very, very different, and I'm actually rather liking it. So before we get going, I want to say a quick thank you to Hagström SAAB near Wyndham in Norfolk for the loan of this car for the duration of the video. Check out their website in the link below to find this and many other very fun SAABs available there. And if you like reviews of interesting, different, unusual cars, then please do check out my back catalogue of other car reviews, and of course all the car repairs and other things going on the channel. Now, on with the review. Now the thing about these cars is the two-stroke makes it sound like you are screaming along at unnaturally high speeds and about to commit some kind of major velocity-related infraction. But the fact is, you're really not. It's an 841cc three-cylinder two-stroke, so it's kind of oil-fed as well as petrol-fed. So it makes an awful lot of fuss without actually going that quickly. 31, I'm sure I'm doing less than that. I need to turn around. Now the SAAB 9.6 is one of those cars that was just insanely long-lived. They brought it out in 1960 and it ran for 20 years until 1980, which is just astonishing. They made nearly 5.5 million of them. And of course, typical of SAABs, which have been making cars since, what, 1945. They became a car company, or emerged as a car company in 1942. Of course, from being an aircraft company already, you can see why these were such good rally cars, because they really do cling to the road. Lots of fun. And so this is only 15 years into SAAB's evolution as a vehicle maker, and already they're at this level. Very impressive stuff. It's absolutely incredible to think that for a couple of years towards the end of the run, this is actually selling in showrooms alongside the new 900, which is just such an evolution beyond what this car was. It's just remarkable. Now, fitted with this column shift gearbox, it's actually surprisingly easy to hustle through the gears. And the defining characteristic of these early cars with the two-stroke engine really is that buzzing engine. You can hear that kind of exhaust fart constantly. Fitted with a 3-speed gearbox with no synchro mesh on first. It wasn't long though before they updated that to have a 4-speed with synchro on everything, which is what we have here. Okay, you're not stopping then, fine. In 1968, 3 years after this car was made, they expanded the front and rear windows to get better visibility, although I've got to say, the visibility is pretty epic even as we stand. And it's quite interesting looking at the shape of the doors and the windows around us, with these little cut-offs just here, and the way that the B-posts slope forward as well. So, looking at the design, it's very interesting for a car of, well, 1960. It's a mid-century, virtually post-war car, where so many cars of the era were very blocky and big, and people had heard of aerodynamics but didn't necessarily understand it. Saab being a plane maker, this thing is the perfect teardrop lozenge. So in theory, it should be good in a wind tunnel. Also, it hasn't really changed a great deal from the previous generation. It's very, very recognisable as still a Saab and still very much unique. There are elements of things like the Rover P4 and of course the Studebaker it was copied from. But even then, it's nothing like that at all. At the front, this grille is almost Italianette. You can see elements of Lancia and Alfa Romeo in there. It's a really, really pretty car. Saab always did go their own way in literally everything. Now looking down the side of the car, and I'm keeping my back to the wind to try and get the microphone away from the noise, there's lots of details you wouldn't necessarily notice at first glance. We have these nice little stainless steel trims above the front wheel arches. And here at the back you'll notice this heavy spatting of the wheel, more aerodynamics in play. And you notice this pretty hubcaps with a lovely little lattice work around there. Really, really nice details. And of course the Saab aeroplane logo on the hubcaps themselves. And another crash safety thing, because Saab, like Volvo, heavy on the crash safety. Look at how this bonnet opens. So it lifts at the front, all normal so far, and then like on a, say, BMW E30 or a Saab 900, it tips forward, so the thing isn't going to lift up on you at speed, which is of course quite a clever idea. This is a 1965 car. It's kind of a crossover year early on in the car's life, because they extended the nose ever so slightly in preparation for engine changes later down the line, and they moved the radiator to the front of the engine bay, whereas previously it had been further back and sort of above the engine at the top. And this, of course, being a 1965 car, has the 3-cylinder 2-stroke oil and petrol mixed fed maniac buzzing under the bonnet. And it really is a very, very interesting layout, because like on later Saab 900s, it all looks to be in the wrong place. The engine is right at the front, then we've got the gearbox sitting behind it, and unusually in a front wheel drive car it's a longitudinally mounted engine which is connected to a gearbox directly behind it. So far so normal, but then the gearbox puts its power out 90 degrees to the front wheels, so the engine is hanging out in front of the axle. The axle is going through the gearbox. It's virtually a transaxle effectively, and there's really nothing behind this point of mechanical significance. It's just the wheels at the back of the car stopping the back bumper scraping on the ground. This really is a fascinating and clever thing. Under this air cleaner we have got a triple throat Solex carburetor feeding down into those 841 cc's of 3 cylinders. Each cylinder has got a carb throat of its own. It really is a fascinating and different, just so unusual piece of engineering. Now finally on this car we have got the boot, and considering it's not a huge car at all, this boot is really, really cavernous. It goes back so far. I love the fact that the boot lid is spring loaded so it sticks up. I don't know if it's just this example that's not got a boot lining or if it's how they all were, but there's no carpet in this one, there's no lining on the sides, it's just straight to the metal. But unlike a lot of cars of the 1960s, this isn't the outer skin we're looking at just here, this is the inner skin. Quite often on the boot of an old car from this era, you'll be looking at basically that bit of metal is what you see on the outside. And if a big heavy bit of luggage goes cracking into the side of it, it can actually dent the outer skin of the car. Not in this case. This is a huge boot with a spare wheel underneath it, and well, amazing. The only trade-off of course from this is that the back seat isn't particularly huge. Okay, I am now back out of the wind and inside the car, and so grateful to be here. Apparently it's 3 degrees, but I think it feels like a lot less than that. I could barely feel my fingers by the time I'd finished filming the very short segment outside the car. This is the interior, and it is really quite fascinating, because back in the 60s, cars were becoming very modern at this point, but at the same time they're kind of hanging on to the legacy of the pre-war years to a small extent. So we've got this real mixed bag of styling cues going on. So let's have a quick look at what we've got. Starting of course with this huge steering wheel, which has got the Saab logo of course. This is such a cool logo. There are certain car logos that just stand out as being just really, really awesome. Jaguar with the cat face coming straight towards you. Alfa Romeo with the guy being eaten by a snake. And of course Saab with a plane flying towards you. That is just awesome. This was a white Bakelite type thing once upon a time with actually a coloured stripe on it. I think it's worn away over the years, and this has got the horn ring in the centre. Now that is a part that wants to stretch its wings and take to the skies, because obviously it's a Saab. That's the way it goes. This has got a big, elegant steering wheel. I like this. Now looking ahead of this, we have got, well, interestingly, we've got our mirror, our rearview mirror, actually mounted onto the dashboard, which is unusual. So our T-shelf is inhibited by the presence of a mirror, but we do though have a pair of big air blowers pointed up at the screen so that we've got ourselves good ventilation going on. Underneath that we've got a metal dashboard, as in a big sheet of metal, which is not necessarily as safe as you might hope for. Fortunately, we have got seat belts in the car. I'll come back to them though, because they are a little unusual. This car has had the addition of a radio grafted into the glove box lid, so I'm not going to try and open the glove box. But moving left from that, we've got a SAAB branded clock, we've got a little ashtray, we've got our SAAB branded dials. I've got a fuel tank, which is SAAB branded, we've got a temperature gauge, which is SAAB branded, and we've got our speedometer in kph, because this is of course a left-hand drive car, also SAAB branded. Now I don't know if this actually has 39,900 kilometers on the clock, or if it's been around a time previously. I couldn't tell you. And of course all our warning lights are literally just little lights in the dashboard. We've got the indicators, the main beams, I guess that's choke, something green, and then we've got these pull switches, which really are very, very Saab. The fan speed, something circular, the choke, the wipers and washers, and of course the headlights, with a wonderful little graphic of a car with its beams just glinting down the road. That's just so pretty. And to the left of that, tucked away, really hard to reach in the corner, we've got the ventilation controls with just 3 little levers to control it. Very, very simple, and I'm sure very effective. Looking at the door design, we have got, let's open this wide up, quite a cool design. I think it's a silver once upon a time around the edge. We've got this nice bit of pleated elephant hide, some nice red tweed at the armrest, very delicate window winders and door handles, and a little door pocket as well. And you notice, like on later Saabs, like the 900, the door actually closes around the sill. This is an idea they've been using for a very, very long time. And the other thing, of course, is how sharply raked this windscreen is, because obviously it's all aerodynamic and quite narrow up top, so it's actually quite narrow down below as well, so I'm quite tight on my elbows. Also more ventilation just here blowing up at the side window, and we do have a side mirror just there too. And of course, finally, in front of us we have got, I do know some Swedish, but this one's possibly beyond me, Saka Kurdsen Loskid, or safety sun visor with the Saab logo. That's really cool. And underfoot, I will show you underfoot as well before we move on again. We've got, like in the Crown Victoria, we have got rubber floor mats, so this car can be wiped out clean if you need to. And we've got a nice big handbrake. And finally, for the controls, and this is quite a big one, we've got a column shift, a 4-speed column shift, which is of course just an H pattern, and then somewhere in here is a reverse, which is always, I think it's out and then down, or is it out and up? I forget which. But yeah, there we have that. Finally, as well as the very, very offset pedals, we have got our dipper for the headlights down there on the floor, underfoot, so it's a foot dipper, so you can't dip the headlights when you're changing gear. Now behind us, we have been joined by a learner car. We have got the biggest rear T-shelf you've ever seen in your life at the back. And we've got rear seats with the tiniest amount of legroom you've ever seen in your life. Rear seat passengers do though benefit from an armrest and a little ashtray, so lots of comfort features going on back down there, which is all cool. Right, now let's get back on the road and keep on driving this thing, because that's kind of fun. Right, so this seatbelt is a little on the bonkers side, like pretty much everything else. It's a 2-point harness, not a 3-point harness. Fastens up as you would expect, but you've got nothing holding you into the seat. It's a little bit weird. Right, so clutch down, start the car, and it revs like a moped. It's absolutely bonkers. Clutch down, of course, up into first. It's an H pattern. And you rev it like crazy, and off it goes. It is bonkers. Right, back on the road again. Another quirky feature, quirk and indeed feature of this car, which goes along with the fact it's a 2-stroke engine, is that it has a freewheeling feature. So if you let off the accelerator, you don't have any engine braking. So it does rely entirely on the foot pedal to bring the car to a stop. Why would you do this, you might ask? Well, other cars had tried this previously, like the Rover P4 of the 50s and late 40s. That had freewheel, because that was more of an economy kind of a thing. The reason for this is an engineering choice. That being because this is a two-stroke engine, it gets its lubrication through its fueling. It's a petrol and oil mix, like on a moped. So if, for example, you're coasting down a long, steep hill, the gearbox, the transmission, will be running faster than the engine. And that can mean you're going to wind up with oil starvation at the engine. Not a good thing. Most people will agree on that. So you have freewheel, which allows it to just coast with the gearbox running faster and the engine still being lubricated at an appropriate manner. But as I say, the downside of that is, of course, you don't have any engine braking, and that is a little disconcerting if you're not expecting it. You know, I didn't know what the roads were going to be like around here when I turned up to drive these cars, but they are suitably, authentically rural Sweden at its finest. The ride is actually very comfortable indeed. It uses a double wishbone setup at the front, trailing U-beams at the rear, coil springs with telescopic dampers all around. So relatively advanced for 1960. I don't know if you watch a channel called Aging Wheels, Robert Dunn over in America. He is really very entertaining indeed, and he recently bought one of these. I don't know if it's a 9.6 or a 9.5, I can't remember, but it was this two-stroke engine. And the video of him blasting around rural America with that little thing screaming is very, very entertaining, and it made me want to drive one even more. Because the torque characteristics are really different from any engine you've otherwise driven. Because, yeah, there's nothing low down. It takes a lot of revs to get the thing moving. It's a bit like driving a Honda VTEC Yo, except the VTEC Yo doesn't kick in. It's just there as soon as you get to higher revs. And then it really does feel incredibly sprightly. You'd think with the kind of power it's making, which is basically as much as a ballpoint pen, it's not going to move. But no, it really does hustle along, and it feels just so fun and so rapid. It's brilliant. I'll fact you here with some two-stroke stuff. So the cars came with an 841cc two-stroke three-cylinder engine. And up until 1965, the radiator sat above and behind the motor. And these earliest cars made 38 horsepower. From 1965 onwards, they made some changes, and it was now making another 2 horsepower. And the car was now pushing out a grand total of 40 horsepower. But then there was also the optional triple-throated carburetor making 52 horsepower with oil injection. This was a major, major upgrade. And I think this is what this car is driving, because it does feel incredibly brisk indeed. And then from 1966, the triple throat Solex with premix oil became standard, but tuned to 42 horsepower. However, over in the States, the USA only got 795 cc's. But that's not where the engine story goes, because in 1967, they made a massive change. They introduced a 4-stroke engine, which completely changed the nature of the car, to the extent that I'm not even going to talk about that, because that deserves a video in its own right. Well, the steering is so light, it really does just float around corners and feels so confident as well. The car is a real joy to drive. And while I can see the constant babbling of the engine becoming a little bit wearing over a long journey, on back roads, it's an entertaining companion. And the turning circle is pretty impressive as well. many of the Swedish vehicles. It was built in its home market and also in Finland. So the majority of them came out of Trollhättan, which is Saab's home, and of course where the Saab museum is still located. But a lot were built by our old friend Valmet in Finland. In fact, the last ever 9.6 was built by Valmet in Finland. Oh, so when you get to these twisties, you do become aware that you are relying entirely on the drum brakes all round to slow the car down. This is an interesting car to drive because it does not thank you for driving it gently. It wants you to be, well, basically revving it like crazy all the time. In many ways, I've found my spirit animal in terms of cars. It's kind of suited me quite well. It means I can rev the car like crazy. I can pretend I'm driving 10 to the dozen. But in fact, I'm not going that quickly because it's only 800 cc's. Now, like the Volvo 200 series, which ran for decades as well, this became a bit of a Swedish icon. Sixten Sarsen's design, well, it's so famous in Sweden, it's actually been on a number of stamps, which is quite an accolade, I'm sure you'll agree. This thing is so much fun, I love it. Oh, down here, aren't we? Indicators are on the left, I hope you'll notice. I know column shifts are quite unusual to find these days, and they do confuse a lot of people, but I really, really like them because they put the gear shift right by the steering wheel, so you barely have to move your hand off the wheel to make a change. Make a change for what's in your life. Do the fifth gear though, that is one thing I would say. Fifth gear would certainly be a bonus on this car. So thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this ride out in this absolutely bonkers little 9.6 with its screaming demon of an engine. I have loved driving this car and I hope you've enjoyed watching it too. If you've enjoyed watching it half as much as I've enjoyed driving it, then you've had a good time, which I'm happy about as well. If you enjoyed this, please, as always, hit like and subscribe and join us again next time driving something, well, I was going to say completely different, but stay tuned for something surprisingly similar. Goodbye.